My name is Alara, and I'm 34 years old. I've always thought of my family as ordinary, not perfect, but grounded in quiet routines and predictable habits. We lived in a small lakeside town called Belmere, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. I worked part-time at the local library, while my husband, Thomas, ran a small construction business with his brother Nathan. We weren't rich, but life was peaceful. Until that afternoon by the river. Nathan had always been the quieter of the two brothers. He lived alone in the house their parents left him after they passed, just 2 streets over. I'd often stop by to drop off meals or chat for a few minutes. But lately, he'd become strange, nervous, distracted. He would avoid eye contact and change topics whenever Thomas's name came up. At first, I thought it was just stress. Then came that day. It was early spring, the air still cool enough to see your breath. I had gone for a walk along the Belmere River, where the water ran slow and green between old sycamores. I liked the solitude there it was where I cleared my thoughts. That's when I noticed a figure in the distance, standing by the bend near the old footbridge. Nathan. He didn't see me, at least not right away. He was wearing a dark jacket, the hood up, and in his hands, he held a metal case rectangular, medium-sized, like something you'd see in a detective movie. My curiosity stirred immediately. I watched him from behind a cluster of reeds, careful not to make a sound. Nathan looked around several times, as if making sure no one was nearby. Then he knelt by the water's edge, took one last look at the case, and with a sudden motion hurled it into the river. It hit the surface with a heavy splash, sank, and was gone. I froze. Why would he do that? He stood there for a few seconds, staring at the water as though it had just swallowed his soul. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back toward his truck. I ducked behind the trees, heart pounding, until I heard the engine start and fade down the road. I stayed by the river for a long time after that, staring at the ripples. The case had disappeared beneath the surface, but I couldn't stop imagining what was inside. A box like that didn't just get tossed away without reason. On my walk home, I tried convincing myself it wasn't my business. Nathan was a private man. Maybe it was something harmless, old paperwork, broken tools, or even ashes. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The way he looked, the tension in his shoulders, the deliberate way he did it, it was all wrong. That night, over dinner, Thomas mentioned that Nathan hadn't been answering his calls lately. "He's probably holed up again," Thomas said, shaking his head. "You know how he gets when he's in one of his moods." I nodded, but my mind wasn't on the conversation. I couldn't tell him what I'd seen. Not yet. Something told me to wait, to keep it to myself. After Thomas went to bed, I sat by the window, watching the moonlight reflect on the stillness of the street. I replayed the image of that silver case hitting the water, the splash, the ripples, the silence after. It didn't feel like something that should be forgotten. The next morning, I tried to go about my day as usual, shelving books at the library, greeting familiar faces. But every time I glanced out the window toward the river, I felt that same pull, curiosity mixed with unease. I thought of Nathan's pale face, his trembling hands. Something inside me whispered that whatever was in that case mattered. By late afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked back to the river, pretending I was just going for a jog. The air smelled like damp earth and pine. Birds called faintly in the distance. When I reached the bend, I saw that the mud near the shore had been disturbed, fresh footprints, large and recent. I crouched down and ran my hand along the wet ground. Something metallic gleamed faintly beneath the shallow water. My breath caught. It was still there. I glanced around, no one. The woods were silent except for the hum of insects and the slow current. I marked the spot with a broken branch, making sure I'd recognize it later. Then I turned back toward home, my heart thundering. All through dinner, I barely spoke. Thomas didn't seem to notice he was busy scrolling through messages on his phone. When he asked if I was feeling okay, I forced a smile. "Just tired," I lied. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My thoughts kept circling back to that glint of metal under the water. What could Nathan possibly need to hide so badly that he'd throw it into the river instead of destroying it? And why did it feel like a piece of me had already become tangled in his secret? The clock ticked past midnight. I made a decision I knew I'd regret, but couldn't stop myself from making. Tomorrow night, I would go back. I would bring gloves, a rope, maybe a flashlight. I needed to know what was inside that case. That night, I decided I had to know what he was trying to hide beneath those dark waters. The more I tried to forget the case, the more it haunted me. The following morning, I woke up with that uneasy feeling still clinging to me, like damp mist that refused to lift. I told myself that it was foolish that I was overthinking Nathan's actions, but that image of the case slipping beneath the water wouldn't leave me alone. It played behind my eyelids every time I blinked, and the splash echoed faintly in the back of my mind as if the river itself was whispering for me to return. I made breakfast for Thomas and tried to act normal, but I could barely eat. He didn't notice my distraction. His attention was glued to his phone. I wanted to ask him about Nathan, about whether he'd seen him lately or if anything strange was going on between them. But the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. Something told me that bringing it up would only make things worse. When Thomas left for work, I stared at the empty coffee cup in front of me for nearly 10 minutes before finally deciding what to do. I changed into jogging clothes, tied my hair up, and headed toward the river again. The morning air was crisp, smelling of pine and dew. I told myself it was just a run, just a coincidence if I happened to pass by the same spot. But when I reached that bend, my pace slowed. The mud near the bank was even darker now, damp and thick from the night's rain. I crouched down and brushed my fingers across the cold ground. The broken branch I'd left as a marker was still there, slightly shifted by the current. And there, beneath the shallow water, was a faint metallic glint. My stomach twisted. The case hadn't drifted away. I forced myself to stand and walk on, pretending to jog past in case anyone was watching. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. When I reached the bridge, I stopped and turned back, scanning the riverbank. Nobody was there. Not yet, anyway. I'd have to come back when it was darker. All day, I couldn't focus on anything. At work, my hands trembled as I scanned books at the counter. Even my coworkers noticed I seemed off. When one of them asked if I was okay, I smiled and said I hadn't slept well. It was true I hadn't slept properly since I saw Nathan that day. By the time I got home, Thomas was already on the couch, watching the news with his usual half-attentive stare. "Hey," he said casually. "Nathan called. Said he's been under the weather lately. I told him we might stop by this weekend." I froze for half a second, then forced a small smile. "That's nice," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Under the weather. That was one way to put it. Thomas didn't notice my tension. He turned back to the TV, oblivious. I spent the rest of the evening pretending to fold laundry, my mind spinning with questions. Why had Nathan lied to Thomas? And what if whatever was in that case was the reason he was under the weather? When night fell, I waited until Thomas was asleep. His breathing grew steady, and the house filled with the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I slipped out of bed, changed into jeans and a jacket, and grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. My hands shook as I reached for a pair of gloves and a length of rope I found in the garage. The streets were quiet. A few porch lights glowed faintly, casting long shadows over the gravel road. I made my way toward the river, the sound of my footsteps swallowed by the night. When I reached the bend, I knelt by the edge, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The water glimmered faintly. I tied one end of the rope around a nearby tree and looped the other around my waist, just in case the ground was slippery. Then, slowly, I stepped closer to the water, crouching down as I pushed the flashlight beam beneath the surface. Something metallic gleamed back. My pulse raced. I reached in. The water was freezing, numbing my skin even through the gloves. My fingers brushed against hard metal. I gritted my teeth and pulled. The case barely moved. It was heavier than I expected, and the suction of the mud fought to keep it buried. After several desperate tugs, I felt it shift. Mud swirled around my hands as the case came free. I nearly slipped backward but caught myself against the tree. The case was slick with grime. The once silver surface now coated in brown and green residue. I dragged it onto the shore and sat back, breathing hard. The night was silent, except for the slow rush of the current. I brushed away the mud with trembling fingers until I saw the faint outline of something engraved on the lid, 2 letters, D, M, I. Frowned, running my thumb over the initials. D, M? They weren't Nathan's. His initials were N, H, who was D, M. A shiver crept up my spine. The case felt colder now, heavier, like it held something alive. I considered opening it right there, but fear won out. What if someone saw me? What if Nathan came looking for it and found me instead? I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, and wrapped it in my jacket. The metal pressed against my side as I walked home, careful not to make a sound. Every step felt like a betrayal. When I reached the house, I slipped through the back door and carried the case into the shed. I wiped it down and hid it behind an old box of garden tools. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, the initials gleaming faintly under the dim light, DM. Who could it be? My mind ran through names, faces, possibilities. And then, suddenly, it hit me, Daniel Moore. Nathan's old friend. The one who'd died years ago in a boating accident. My breath caught. Daniel's death had always seemed suspicious to me, though no one in the family ever spoke about it. Could this case be connected to him somehow? I turned off the shed light and stepped back into the house, my heart pounding. When I wiped off the mud and saw the initials engraved on it, my heart stopped. Those initials didn't belong to Nathan, they belonged to someone who shouldn't exist anymore. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 2 engraved letters, DM. They felt like they were burned into my memory. Daniel Moore. The name echoed in my head like a whisper from a grave. Daniel had been Nathan's closest friend years ago, before I even married Thomas. I'd met him only once at a family barbecue, but I remembered his warm smile and how he'd made everyone laugh, including Nathan, who rarely smiled at all. Then, suddenly, Daniel was gone. They said it was an accident, a boating mishap late one night on the lake. His body was recovered days later. Nathan barely spoke for weeks after that. Thomas said losing Daniel had broken something inside him. But if the case belonged to Daniel, why was Nathan hiding it now, all these years later? The question spun circles around my mind. I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the occasional groan of the old house settling, and Thomas's steady breathing beside me. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow deeper. By dawn, I knew I wouldn't find peace until I looked inside that case. Thomas left early that morning for a job site. The moment his truck disappeared down the street, I went to the shed. My hands trembled as I moved the box of tools aside. The case sat there, streaked with dried mud, cold to the touch. Up close, I could see that it was sealed with a 3-digit combination lock. The numbers were faded but still visible. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table, pulling up a chair. The lock mocked me, daring me to try. I thought of Nathan, methodical, careful Nathan. If this belonged to him now, he would have used something simple, something meaningful. I tried his birthday first. Nothing. Then his old address number, still locked. I bit my lip and leaned back, staring at the case like it might give up its secret if I looked hard enough. That's when I noticed faint scratches near the lock, as though someone else had already tried to force it open. I rummaged through Thomas's toolbox and found a small screwdriver. It took time, patience, and several failed attempts, but finally, the latch clicked. The sound was soft but sharp enough to make me flinch. I hesitated before lifting the lid. A part of me wanted to slam it shut again, pretend I'd never found it, but curiosity or maybe something darker pushed me forward. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. Sealed envelopes, a small plastic bag with photographs, a folded map, and an old phone wrapped carefully in a plastic cover. No money. No jewelry. Nothing that looked valuable. Yet somehow, it felt heavier than gold. I picked up the first envelope. It was addressed in faded handwriting, "For Nathan, when it's time." My stomach twisted. The handwriting, I recognized it immediately. It was Daniel's. I slid out the contents. A letter, yellowed and creased. The ink had bled slightly from water damage, but most of it was still legible. The words sent chills down my spine. I don't know who I can trust anymore. I thought I was helping, but everything's gone too far. If you find this, it means I couldn't stop him. Be careful who you tell she doesn't know yet. No name. No context. Just those words. She doesn't know yet. Who was she? My thoughts immediately went to Lena, a name I'd only heard once or twice in passing years ago. Thomas had mentioned her as an old friend of Nathan's and Daniel's. I'd never met her, but something about the tone of that letter made me think she was involved somehow. I opened the bag of photographs next. My pulse quickened as I laid them out on the table. The first few were ordinary Nathan, Daniel, and a woman with dark hair laughing together at what looked like a park. But as I flipped through them, the images grew more intimate. Nathan and the woman standing close, their hands brushing, their smiles secretive. The last few photos sent a shiver through me. Daniel was no longer in them. Just Nathan and the woman, their expressions tense, almost fearful. In one picture, they stood near a cabin by the woods, the same woods where Daniel's boat had supposedly launched the night he died. My throat went dry. The woman looked oddly familiar. I couldn't place it at first, but then I realized she had a faint resemblance to me. The same dark hair, similar eyes, even the same nervous half-smile. It was uncanny. I reached for the phone wrapped in plastic. It was old, maybe 10 years at least. I powered it on, and to my surprise, it buzzed faintly to life. It asked for a passcode. I tried the usual Nathan's birthday. Daniel's, even 0000. Nothing worked. The screen stayed locked. Frustrated, I stared at it, trying to decide whether to keep going or call Nathan directly. But the thought of facing him terrified me. What if he realized I'd stolen the case? What if this was something dangerous? My mind kept circling back to the same idea: she doesn't know yet. Didn't know what? That Daniel had been in danger? That Nathan had something to do with it? Or was she someone entirely different? I pushed the case shut and backed away from the table, my hands shaking. The letters, the photos, the phone. It was too much to process. I hid the case again, this time beneath a loose floorboard in the hall closet, then sank to the floor, pressing my palms to my face. My chest ached with confusion and fear. Nathan had thrown this into the river for a reason. But why now? After all these years, why not destroy it? Unless he couldn't. Unless it contained something he needed to hide but couldn't bear to erase. When Thomas came home that evening, I could barely look at him. He kissed my cheek, oblivious, and started talking about his day, a new project, a late payment, the usual. But every word sounded distant, muffled, unreal. I just kept seeing that woman's face in those photos, her smile fading with each picture. I had no idea that what I was about to see would unravel our entire family's past. The photographs told a story Nathan had buried deep. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill that had settled inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about those photos: Nathan, Daniel, and that mysterious woman. Every image seemed to hold a silent scream, something just out of frame that begged to be understood. I kept seeing her face in my mind, that woman, the one who looked like me. I felt as if I were staring into an echo of myself, not a mirror image, but a haunting resemblance, as though I'd been shadowed by someone else's past. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. My thoughts wouldn't stay still. The letter from Daniel, the one that warned, "She doesn't know yet." Who was he talking about? Could it have been her? Or worse, could it have been me? I needed answers. After Thomas left for work, I went to the hall closet and carefully lifted the floorboard where I'd hidden the case. The metal was still cold when I touched it, as though it carried its own pulse. I carried it to my bedroom, locking the door behind me before opening it again. The photos stared back at me, each one loaded with secrets. I studied them more closely this time. In the background of one picture, the one where Nathan and the woman stood by the lake, I noticed a reflection in the water, a third figure. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakably there. Daniel, watching them. My heart raced. The tension between the three of them was palpable even through the faded ink of those photographs. And then there was the map I hadn't looked at yet. I unfolded it across the bed. It was hand-drawn, with markings around the outskirts of Belmere, near the old forest trail. There was a small X marked beside a note, "Cabin, keep safe." I didn't know whether "keep safe" referred to a person, a place, or something hidden there, but I knew I had to find out. Before I could plan anything, I remembered the USB drive tucked into the corner of the case. I hadn't noticed it the night before. It was small and covered in dust, labeled only with a strip of faded tape, "D's files." I plugged it into my laptop, my stomach tightening. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a folder appeared, 5 video files, all dated within the same month Daniel had died. I hovered my cursor over the first one, took a deep breath, and I clicked play. The video began shakily. Daniel was holding the camera himself, his face illuminated by dim light. His eyes were tired, haunted. "If you're watching this," he said, "then I didn't make it." My breath caught. His voice raw, trembling filled the room. "I trusted them," he continued, "but I was wrong. Nathan doesn't know everything yet, and Thomas, he's in deeper than he'll ever admit. If she finds out the truth, she'll never forgive us." The screen flickered, and for a second, I saw a shadow behind him, someone moving. Daniel looked over his shoulder before the video abruptly cut to black. I stared at the laptop, frozen. Thomas. He'd mentioned my husband. I clicked on the next file, but it was corrupted. The third one opened after a moment, this time showing Nathan pacing inside a small room, his face pale, his hands shaking. Daniel's voice was behind the camera. "Just tell me what happened." "It wasn't supposed to go that far," Nathan replied. "He said it would be quick, clean. She wasn't supposed to be there." My chest tightened. "She wasn't supposed to be there." The phrase echoed through my mind. Who was she? The woman in the photos? The one who looked like me? I skipped ahead, my pulse pounding in my ears. In the final few seconds, Nathan slammed his hands on the table, shouting, "You promised me she'd be safe." The screen froze, then faded to black again. I sat there for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was spinning, torn between disbelief and fear. If these recordings were real, then my husband, my Thomas, had been part of something awful. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were fitting together too easily. Thomas's evasiveness whenever Daniel's name came up. His sudden dislike for Nathan these past few months. The way he avoided talking about the past altogether. I replayed the first video again, trying to catch something I'd missed. This time, as Daniel shifted the camera slightly, a reflection flickered across a glass window behind him. My heart nearly stopped. Parked just outside was a familiar car, Thomas's truck. The same truck that sat in our driveway every night. I covered my mouth, trying not to cry. I didn't want to believe that the man I'd built my life with had been part of this, whatever this was. I felt dizzy. Sitting there in the quiet room, the faint hum of my laptop the only sound. I tried to think rationally, to calm myself, but there was no denying the evidence. Daniel's videos weren't fabrications, they were warnings. Clues, pleas for help. Nathan had known all along. That must have been why he threw the case into the river to bury Daniel's confession before someone like me found it. But why now? Why, after all these years, did it resurface in our lives? I shut the laptop, my hands trembling. The truth was starting to form a shape I wasn't ready to see. Maybe Nathan wasn't just protecting himself. Maybe he was protecting me. But from what? Or who? I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where Thomas's truck had parked countless times. Everything looked normal, too normal. The sky was golden, children were riding bikes, and an old man watered his garden across the street. But for the first time, Belmere didn't feel safe anymore. Because somewhere in those buried secrets, my husband's name was written in the same ink as Daniel's death. When I finally opened one video file, Nathan's voice whispered something I could never unhear. "If you're watching this, it means I couldn't keep my secret any longer." I pressed play again, even though my hands were shaking. The next file on the USB drive began with the same dimly lit room. But this time, it wasn't Daniel on camera, it was Nathan. He looked younger, maybe in his late 20s, with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression. He sat on the edge of a bed, staring into the camera like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. "If you're watching this," he began, voice trembling, "it means I couldn't keep my secret any longer." My throat tightened. His tone was low, almost desperate. "Daniel's gone," he continued. "I thought what we did was right at the time, but it wasn't. He wanted to go to the police. He said he couldn't stay quiet about what Thomas and I were doing. I told him we'd fix it before it got worse, but I was wrong." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling as they came into view. "It was supposed to be an accident, but it wasn't. He tried to stop Thomas. I couldn't stop either of them." My stomach twisted. I paused the video, pressing my fingers to my lips. Nathan's confession confirmed what I feared. Daniel's death hadn't been an accident. My husband, Thomas, had been there. I hit play again, forcing myself to listen. "I buried the truth for years," Nathan said. "But now someone knows. Someone's been sending me messages, photos, letters. They know about that night. They know what we did. And they want something from me." He glanced off camera, his breathing uneven. "They said if I don't deliver what they asked for, they'll tell her. I can't let her find out. She doesn't deserve to carry this weight." He rubbed his face, whispering, "God, what have we done?" Before the screen went black, I sat in stunned silence. I could hear my own pulse thudding in my ears. The pieces were falling into place, and each one cut deeper than the last. Daniel had discovered something about my husband and Nathan, something they'd been hiding. And when Daniel tried to expose it, they silenced him. But who was blackmailing Nathan now? And more importantly, who was her? I leaned back, trying to steady my breathing. It could have been Lena. Maybe she was the woman in those photographs, the one they'd both tried to protect. But Nathan's words didn't sound like he was talking about Lena. They sounded like he was talking about someone else entirely. Someone who didn't know anything about what they'd done. Someone like me. The realization hit so hard I almost dropped the laptop. I'd married into this family without ever knowing the shadow that hung over it. Nathan had been protecting me not from a stranger, but from my own husband. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I shut the laptop and stood, pacing. My mind was a storm of memories, every small lie, every odd silence, every time Thomas had changed the subject when Nathan's name came up. He'd been covering for him, for them both. When I finally gathered the courage to look out the window, I noticed something unsettling. Nathan's car was parked across the street. My heart jolted. He was sitting there, motionless, staring at our house. I froze, watching him. Minutes passed. He didn't move. Then, slowly, he started the engine and drove away. I didn't know if it was guilt that had brought him there or something else. But I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed answers from him directly. By the time Thomas called that evening, saying he'd be staying late at work, I already had my keys in hand. I drove to Nathan's house, my nerves wound tight. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in orange streaks that looked almost bloody through my windshield. Nathan's driveway was empty, but his porch light was on. I knocked once, twice, then harder. No answer. I tried the handle, it was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and dust. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I stepped into the living room, my voice barely above a whisper. "Nathan?" No reply. I walked farther in, my shoes scuffing softly against the floor. Papers were scattered across the table, old letters, some of them crumpled. One caught my eye. It was, from Daniel, written years ago. "If anything happens to me, don't trust Thomas." My blood ran cold. I heard a noise from down the hall, a door creaking. I turned sharply. Nathan stepped out of his bedroom, his face pale as if he hadn't slept in days. He froze when he saw me. "Elara?" His voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About the case. About Daniel. About Thomas." He went still. "You shouldn't have opened it." "I had to." "You threw it into the river, Nathan. What did you expect me to think? He rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes darting toward the window. You don't understand. You shouldn't have found it. It's dangerous. Dangerous? I stepped closer. Then tell me the truth. Did Thomas kill Daniel? Nathan looked broken, like a man who'd been holding back a tidal wave for years. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said softly. Thomas just wanted to scare him. But Daniel fought back. He slipped, hit his head on the dock. It was over in seconds. I stared at him, horrified. And you covered it up? He nodded weakly. I helped him push the boat out. We sank it farther down the lake. I thought it was the only way to protect the family. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand why he hadn't told me sooner. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he whispered something that sent a chill through me deeper than anything else. It's not just about Daniel anymore, Alara. Someone's been watching us. Someone who knows everything. They've already reached out to me, and if you keep digging, they'll come for you too. I took a step back, my pulse pounding in my ears. Who are they? He looked at me with haunted eyes. I don't know. But they said they wanted the case back. Before she finds out. She? I echoed. Nathan swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. Because she's still alive. I knew I had to confront Nathan before Thomas returned, no matter what it cost. Nathan didn't deny it. He begged me not to tell anyone. I stood there frozen, Nathan's words echoing in my head. She's still alive. The way he said it, soft, almost reverent, made my skin prickle. My voice trembled when I finally managed to ask, Who is she, Nathan? Who's still alive? Nathan rubbed his face, pacing the small living room. His movements were restless, almost frantic. You shouldn't have come here, he muttered. It's not safe for you to know. I already know too much, I shot back. You said Daniel's death wasn't an accident, that Thomas was involved, and now you're telling me there's someone alive who's supposed to be dead. So tell me who she is. Nathan stopped pacing. His eyes darted toward the window as if expecting someone to be watching. Then he sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Her name was Lena. The name hit me like a jolt of electricity. Lena? I whispered. Thomas mentioned her once. He said she was your friend. She was more than that. Nathan interrupted quietly. She was everything. Daniel loved her. So did I, in my own way. But she chose Daniel. That's what caused the fight between them. I could barely process the words. Then what happened to her? Nathan's expression darkened. After Daniel died, Lena vanished. Everyone assumed she left town out of grief. But that wasn't true. Thomas helped her disappear. He said it was for her own safety. That she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. But when I tried to find her years later, I couldn't. Every lead I followed ended the same way, a dead end, until last month. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages before handing it to me. The screen showed a text thread with an unknown number. The messages were short, chilling. Unknown. You never told her, did you? Nathan. Who is this? Unknown. The one who knows what you buried. She's alive. I felt my stomach drop. You think Lena is the one blackmailing you? He shook his head slowly. No. The messages came from someone else. But whoever they are, they know about her. And they know about Daniel. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. Nathan, this is insane. If she's alive, where is she? He hesitated. That's what I've been trying to find out. The night I threw the case into the river, I got another message. They told me to get rid of it or they'd come for me next. I panicked. I thought I could sink it and be done with it. But now? His gaze met mine, full of guilt. You found it, Alara. And that means they'll come looking for you, too. I stepped back, my pulse hammering. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend I don't know? Pretend my husband isn't part of this nightmare? Nathan's voice cracked. Please, don't tell Thomas yet. If he finds out you've seen what's in that case, I don't know what he'll do. His words hit harder than I expected. The image of Thomas's calm, confident face flashed in my mind, the man who kissed me goodnight, who laughed with me at dinner, who once held me as if I were the only person in the world. Could that same man really be capable of such darkness? Nathan stepped closer. I'll fix this, he said quietly. I'll find Lena. I'll end the blackmail. And I'll make sure no one gets hurt. But you have to promise me you'll stay out of it. I shook my head. No, Nathan, I can't. This has gone too far. Daniel deserves the truth. I deserve the truth. He looked desperate now. You think truth will save you? It won't. It'll destroy you. The truth is poison, Alara. Once you drink it, there's no going back. His words sent a chill down my spine. I could see genuine fear in his eyes, not just fear of being caught, but fear of someone far more dangerous than either of us understood. Just tell me one thing, I said softly. Why would Thomas help Lena disappear? Nathan hesitated for a long time before answering. Because she knew something that could ruin him. And maybe ruin you too. I frowned. Me? How could it ruin me? He hesitated again, then whispered. Because she knew what Daniel found out about your husband's business and about what happened the night he died. Before I could ask more, his phone buzzed on the table. He looked down at it and went pale. I stepped closer and read the message over his shoulder. Unknown. You shouldn't have told her. The room felt suddenly smaller. My breath caught in my throat. Nathan locked his phone and looked up at me, panic flickering across his face. You have to leave, now. I backed toward the door. Nathan! Go! He shouted. Before it's too late. I stumbled out into the night air, heart hammering, and ran to my car. The streetlights blurred as I sped home, my mind spiraling. Someone was watching him, maybe both of us. By the time I reached my driveway, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked hollow, haunted not the face of the woman I used to be. Inside the house, the silence was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. I checked the locks twice before finally sinking onto the couch. Nathan's words replayed over and over. She's still alive. You shouldn't have told her. Somewhere out there, Lena was alive, and whoever had been pulling the strings all these years knew exactly what I'd done. The fear was suffocating, but underneath it was something else. A quiet, burning determination. I wasn't going to be another secret buried by the men in this family. If Thomas thought he could hide from the truth, he was wrong. I needed to find Lena before he did. But when he whispered, "She's still alive," my world tilted on its axis. If Lena was alive, then everything I thought I knew about my husband was a lie. Sleep was impossible after that night. I lay awake listening to the house groan, the refrigerator hum, and the wind scrape against the siding. Every sound made me flinch. I kept picturing Nathan's pale face, the panic in his eyes when he said Lena's name. She's still alive. The words wouldn't leave me alone. By morning, I felt like I was walking through fog. Thomas was in the kitchen, humming softly as he poured coffee, acting as if the world was perfectly normal. I forced myself to sit down at the table, praying he wouldn't notice how my hands trembled. He looked up with a smile. Rough night? I nodded. Couldn't sleep. Too much caffeine, he said lightly, kissing my forehead. His lips were warm. Familiar. Safe. And yet, I couldn't stop seeing Daniel's reflection in that video. The way Thomas's truck appeared outside his window moments before Daniel's death. I wanted to ask him so badly. Where were you that night, Thomas? Why did you lie? But my throat tightened around the words. Instead, I mumbled something about needing to go into town and left before he could ask questions. Once I was in the car, I finally let the fear show. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going at first, but my mind kept circling back to Lena. If she was alive, she was the key to everything. The truth about Daniel, the truth about Nathan, the truth about Thomas. At the library, I used the computer lab where I worked part-time. I typed Lena's full name into every database I could think of. Lena Harrow, Belmere, Daniel Moore, and even Nathan Harris. Nothing. No records, no obituaries, nothing beyond a few old photos from 10 years ago. It was as if she had vanished from the world. But then, buried deep in a social media search, I found something. A photo posted only 3 months ago. The account name was Claire Monroe. The woman in the picture was older, maybe in her mid-30s, with short dark hair, but her eyes, they were unmistakable. The same eyes from those old photographs. Lena. My pulse quickened. I scrolled through the rest of her page, but there wasn't much to see, no location tags, no family. Just vague captions like starting over and new beginnings. Still, it was enough. I created a new profile under a fake name and sent her a private message. Hi Claire, I think we might know each other from Belmere. Do you remember the Harris brothers? I didn't expect an answer right away, but only minutes later, my phone buzzed. Who is this? My hands trembled as I typed back. Just someone who knows what happened to Daniel. There was a long pause. Then another message appeared. You shouldn't be contacting me. It's dangerous. I swallowed hard and replied, I need to talk to you. Please. She didn't respond again that day. But that night, as I sat on the couch pretending to watch TV beside Thomas, my phone buzzed once more. Tomorrow, noon. Call me from a private number. Don't use your real phone. I glanced at Thomas, who didn't even notice the message. His attention was fixed on the screen, his jaw set in that calm, collected way I'd once found comforting. But now I saw something else in that expression calculation. A man who'd learned how to hide. The next morning, I used the public phone outside a gas station on the edge of town. My heart pounded as I dialed the number she'd sent. She answered on the first ring. Who are you? My name's Ilara, I said, keeping my voice low. I'm Thomas's wife. I know about Daniel. I know about you. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. Don't say his name. Lena, I just want to understand. Nathan told me you were alive. Her tone changed, colder now, cautious. If Nathan told you anything, you need to forget it. They're watching both of you. Who's watching? I asked. Thomas? The person blackmailing him? Don't trust anyone, she whispered. Not even Nathan. Her words made me dizzy. Lena, please, what happened that night on the lake? What did Daniel find out? A beat of silence. Then she said, he found something that could destroy your husband, something that never should have existed. What was it? I pressed, but she didn't answer. I heard a faint noise in the background like footsteps, then her hurried voice. I have to go. Lena, wait. The line went dead. I stood there staring at the phone, my hand trembling. The only sound was the soft hum of cars passing in the distance. By the time I returned home, my nerves were frayed. I tried to act normal around Thomas, but my head buzzed with everything Lena had said. Don't trust anyone. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep beside him. I waited until he dozed off, then quietly took his phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages. Most were about work until I reached one from a contact saved as CM. My stomach flipped. The most recent message read, we need to move her again. She's starting to talk. Move her again. My hands went cold. That could only mean Lena. I snapped a photo of the message with my own phone and put his back where it was. I lay awake beside him until sunrise, my body rigid, every breath careful. When morning came, Thomas got ready for work without a word, though I noticed he was quieter than usual. He kissed my cheek as he left the same kiss he'd given me 1,000 times, but this time, it felt like a lie. I watched his truck disappear down the street and whispered to the empty house, "You're not the man I thought you were." That afternoon, as I replayed the conversation with Lena in my head, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My stomach sank when I saw Thomas's truck through the window. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. He walked in calmly, but there was something different in his eyes, sharper, searching. "Hey," he said casually. "I was just thinking about taking you out for dinner tonight, but first." His gaze drifted toward the window. "Did you happen to go near the river this week?" The air left my lungs. "What?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The river. I saw tire tracks down there. Looked like your car." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "Thomas, what are you talking about?" He shrugged, still smiling faintly. Just curious. The next morning, Thomas came home early, and his first question was about the river. Thomas never asked about the trip, only about what I'd seen near the water. The moment Thomas mentioned the river, I felt the air drain from the room. His smile lingered, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, the kind of look that told me he wasn't really asking a question. He already knew. I didn't go near the river, I lied, forcing a laugh that sounded too thin, too brittle. Why would I? He tilted his head slightly, watching me the way a predator watches prey. I don't know, he said, voice calm but heavy. Just seemed like someone was poking around there recently. Figured I'd ask. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. Well, it wasn't me, I said, turning away under the pretense of making coffee. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the mug. Thomas walked to the window, staring out toward the street, his arms crossed. You know, he said quietly, Nathan's been acting strange lately. I think he's getting paranoid. You should stay away from him for a while. My stomach twisted. Why? He looked at me then, and I swear I saw something flicker behind his expression, something dark. Just trust me. He's not stable right now. He might say things that don't make sense. I wanted to laugh at the irony of it. If only Thomas knew how much Nathan had already said. But I kept my voice neutral. Okay, I said. I'll keep my distance. He studied me for a moment longer, then smiled again. Good. When he left for work, I stood at the window until his truck disappeared. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. Every word out of his mouth felt rehearsed, as if he were testing me, seeing how much I knew. I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my phone and replayed the photo I'd taken of his text messages the night before. We need to move her again. She's starting to talk. The words looked even colder in daylight. Who was we? Nathan was clearly out of that loop now. That meant there was someone else, someone working with Thomas to keep Lena hidden. If I didn't act soon, she might vanish again. That night, I made a decision. I would follow him. I told Thomas I was exhausted and went to bed early. I waited until I heard the shower turn on, then slipped out of bed, grabbed my keys, and hid in the garage until he left. Sure enough, an hour later, I heard his truck start up. The sound faded down the road. I followed in my car, keeping my headlights dim and my distance wide. My heart hammered in my chest the entire time. He drove out of town, past the lake, past the old industrial area, until the road narrowed into a single dirt path leading toward the woods. He finally stopped near an old cabin, the same one I'd seen in Daniel's photographs. My breath caught. I parked a few 100 feet away, hidden behind trees, and watched. The night was thick with fog. Thomas got out of the truck, flashlight in hand, and walked toward the cabin. After a minute, another figure emerged from the shadows, a woman. I squinted through the darkness. She had short hair, and when the flashlight passed over her face, I saw her clearly. Lena. My chest constricted. She was alive. They stood close, talking in low voices I couldn't make out. But their body language said enough tension. Fear. At one point, Lena pointed toward the woods, her hands shaking. Thomas grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly, and said something that made her flinch. I took out my phone and started recording. I zoomed in, catching their silhouettes under the faint light leaking through the cabin window. I couldn't hear their words, but the scene itself was damning enough. My husband meeting secretly with the woman who was supposed to be dead. Suddenly, Thomas's flashlight beams swept across the trees, closer, until it illuminated the spot just beside me. My stomach dropped. I ducked behind a log, pressing a hand over my mouth, praying he hadn't seen me. For what felt like forever, I didn't move. Then, slowly, I heard the crunch of gravel as he turned back toward the cabin. I crawled back to my car and drove home as quietly as possible, my hands trembling on the wheel. My mind was chaos. I didn't know what was worse, that Thomas had lied to me about Lena being dead, or that he was still keeping her somewhere hidden, like a secret that refused to stay buried. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, the camera still running in my lap. My chest felt tight, as if my ribs could no longer contain the weight of what I knew. Inside the house, the silence was suffocating. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and sat in the living room, staring at nothing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection of Thomas's flashlight in the woods, that cold, searching beam. Nathan had been right. The case wasn't the real danger. It was what it revealed. And now I was trapped between two men, one who wanted to protect me, and one who might destroy me if he found out what I'd seen. When dawn broke, I felt too hollow to sleep. I didn't drink and watched the sun crawl across the floorboards. By late morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Stop following him. No greeting. No name. Just those 3 words. My blood ran cold. I looked out the window, half expecting to see someone watching from across the street. But the neighborhood was still and quiet. I deleted the message immediately, though it didn't matter, whoever sent it already knew. When Thomas came home that afternoon, he was quieter than usual. He didn't mention the river again. Didn't mention Nathan. Didn't mention work. But the silence between us was thick and unnatural, like we were two strangers pretending to live a shared life. At dinner, I could barely swallow a bite. He kept looking at me too long, too steadily. After we cleared the dishes, he said softly, "You know I'd do anything to protect you, right?" The words should have comforted me. Instead, they terrified me. That night, I packed a bag and followed Thomas to see where he went after dark. I never expected to find myself driving into the same woods where Daniel died. I couldn't shake the image of Thomas standing in that cabin with Lena. Every part of me screamed to run, to get out, to call the police, to tell someone, but fear kept me frozen. If I went to the police without proof, Thomas would find out. And if Nathan was right about someone else watching us, then I'd be putting myself in even greater danger. Still, I needed answers. I needed to know how far Thomas had gone. That night, after pretending to sleep for hours, I slipped quietly out of bed. The house was still and cold. I grabbed my keys, the small flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and my phone. I'd already decided I was going back to the cabin. Whatever was happening there, I needed to see it for myself this time. Up close. The drive felt endless. The narrow back roads were silent, lined with trees that reached out like blackened hands. I remembered those woods from the photographs in Daniel's case, the same place where his body had been found floating days after he fell from his boat. A chill ran through me. The thought that my husband might have returned to the same place made my stomach twist. When I reached the edge of the woods, I parked a safe distance away and killed the headlights. The only light came from a thin crescent moon hanging low in the sky. My heartbeat felt too loud as I got out and started walking down the dirt path, my shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The cabin came into view, a small rotting structure with boards missing from the walls and a faint glow spilling from the window. I crouched behind a fallen log and raised my phone's camera, zooming in on the light inside. Thomas was there again, and so was Lena. They were arguing. I couldn't hear every word, but their voices were sharp, cutting through the night. Lena's face was pale, her expression tense. Thomas gestured wildly, frustration twisting his features. Then, for the first time, I heard her clearly. "You promised to keep me safe from Nathan," she shouted. My breath caught. "Nathan?" Thomas slammed his hand on the table inside the cabin. "You think he's the one watching you? He's not the one sending those messages." "So who is?" Lena demanded. "You can't keep this hidden forever." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I already told you, Lena. The less you know, the better. You're alive because of me, remember that. Alive because of him." The words echoed in my mind. My stomach churned as I pieced it together. He hadn't just helped her disappear, he'd kept her alive all this time. But why? Out of guilt? Love? Or because she knew something that could destroy him? Lena's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "You think she doesn't suspect?" My chest tightened. She was talking about me. Thomas didn't answer immediately. He stared out the window. Instead, his jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice so low I barely caught it, he said, "If she ever finds out, it'll all come undone." I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. The phone in my hand shook so violently I nearly dropped it. My mind was spinning too fast to focus. They were keeping secrets together, secrets about Daniel, about the night he died, and about me. I started to move, but the dry leaves beneath my shoe crackled loudly. Thomas turned his head toward the sound, and I froze. His flashlight flicked on, the beam slicing through the darkness. It swept across the clearing, closer, closer, until it illuminated the tree beside me. I ducked behind the log, holding my breath. I could hear him step outside, the crunch of gravel under his boots. "Who's there?" he called out. Silence. Then, Lena's voice, sharp and nervous. "Thomas, come back inside. It's probably an animal." He waited for another long moment before turning off the light and retreating. I didn't move until I heard the cabin door creak shut. I crawled backward, careful not to make a sound, then sprinted for my car as quietly as I could. My lungs burned by the time I reached it. Once inside, I locked the doors and started the engine, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The drive back felt endless. My headlights caught glimpses of the trees whipping past, their shadows twisting like ghosts. Every bend in the road made me feel like someone was following me. When I finally reached the house, I parked down the block, afraid Thomas might already be home. But when I slipped inside, the house was dark and empty. Relief hit me like a wave, followed quickly by dread. What if he came home and noticed I'd been gone? I sank onto the couch, staring at the video I'd recorded. The footage was grainy, the voices faint, but it was enough to prove that Lena was alive, that Thomas had been lying, and that both of them were entangled in something far darker than I'd imagined. The clock struck 3 a.m. As I sat there, playing the footage over and over, trying to make sense of the fragments. What did Lena mean about being kept safe from Nathan? Why would Thomas protect her if she was part of Daniel's death? And who was sending those threatening messages to both of them? A soft knock broke the silence. I froze. It was coming from the front door. My first instinct was to hide, but curiosity outweighed fear. I tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole. Nathan. He was standing there, drenched in sweat, his eyes wide and haunted. In his hands was the metal case clean now. The mud gone. The surface dull from scrubbing. I opened the door slowly. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" He stepped inside without answering, glancing nervously over his shoulder before closing the door behind him. "You shouldn't have gone out there," he said, his voice low and trembling. My chest tightened. "How do you know I did?" He lifted the case slightly. "Because they already know you did. They always know." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Nathan set the case on the table, his hands shaking. "They called me tonight, said if I didn't get it back someone was going to die." My stomach twisted. "Who?" He met my eyes, his face pale. "You." When I reached home, Nathan was waiting at my door holding the empty case. He knew I'd opened it, and he wasn't angry, he was terrified. Nathan's hands trembled as he set the case on the table. The metallic click of it hitting the wood made me flinch. It was the same case I'd dragged out of the river, the same one I'd pried open in secret, but now it was spotless, gleaming faintly in the dim light. He'd cleaned it, almost reverently, like a man trying to wash away his sins. I stared at him, my voice barely a whisper. "You know I opened it." He didn't answer at first. His eyes darted to the window, the door, the dark corners of the room, as if expecting someone else to be there. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "You shouldn't have done that, Alara. You don't know what you've started." Fear crawled up my spine. "What are you talking about? You said they called you. Who did?" Nathan exhaled shakily and sank into the nearest chair, rubbing his temples. "You still don't understand. The case, everything inside it, it wasn't just Daniel's confession. It was evidence. Evidence he'd gathered before he died." "Evidence of what?" I demanded. Nathan looked up, his eyes hollow. "Of what Thomas and I were part of what your husband has been hiding for years." I felt my stomach knot. "Nathan, please. Just tell me the truth." He nodded slowly, as if the effort of speaking it out loud would break him. Daniel found out that Thomas was using the construction company for something else. Money laundering, illegal shipments. He stumbled across contracts with fake names, offshore accounts, shell companies tied to our business. My blood went cold. He confronted Thomas about it, Nathan continued. They argued near the lake. Thomas panicked. It got physical. Daniel fell, hit his head, and he didn't get back up. I pressed my hand to my mouth, my vision blurring. And you helped cover it up? Nathan nodded miserably. He was my brother, Alara. I thought I was protecting him. But that night Daniel had already sent copies of the evidence somewhere. He didn't trust either of us. I felt my heart hammer in my chest. Where? He shook his head. That's what we never found out. Whoever has that evidence now is the same person who's been blackmailing me. The same person who knows you opened the case. The words hit me like a blow. I backed up, my body trembling. So you think this person is watching us? I know they are, Nathan said. They've been following me for months, sending messages, threatening to expose everything unless I give them what Daniel left behind. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking. That's why I threw the case into the river. I thought if it was gone, they'd stop. I wanted to scream. And now they think I have it. Nathan nodded grimly. Thomas doesn't even know the half of it. If he finds out you've seen what's inside that case, he'll lose control. He's desperate to keep this buried. The words barely registered before a sudden noise from the back door made us both jump. A sharp crash. Then another. Nathan's eyes went wide. They're here. I turned toward the kitchen, my pulse racing, but before I could move, the back door burst open. The sound of splintering wood ripped through the silence. Thomas stepped into the doorway. The look on his face froze me where I stood, part fury, part fear, part betrayal. His eyes darted from Nathan to the case on the table. His voice was dangerously calm. What the hell is going on here? Nathan stood quickly, his hands raised. Thomas, listen to me, don't. Thomas snapped, his tone sharp as glass. I told you to get rid of that thing. I tried, Nathan said, his voice cracking. But she found it first. Thomas turned toward me, his expression unreadable. You opened it. I couldn't speak. My silence was answer enough. He exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. You have no idea what you've done, Alara. Then tell me, I shouted, my voice shaking. Tell me what this is all about. Tell me what you did to Daniel. Thomas's jaw tightened. You don't understand. Daniel was going to ruin everything. He wasn't innocent, Alara. He was blackmailing us. Nathan stepped between us. That's a lie, he said. Daniel was trying to save us. You killed him because he threatened to go to the police. Thomas turned on him, his composure cracking. You think I wanted that? You think I planned it? He attacked me first. Stop lying, Nathan shouted back. You dragged his body into the boat, Thomas. I helped you sink it. Don't pretend this was some accident. The room pulsed with tension. I could barely breathe. The two brothers glared at each other like strangers, years of guilt boiling to the surface. Thomas slammed his hand on the table, rattling the case. This isn't about Daniel anymore. Someone out there has what he found. If we don't get it back, we're all finished. What are you talking about? I asked. My voice barely audible. Thomas looked at me, his tone softening. You think the money stopped with me? You think I was running this alone? There are people, dangerous people, who won't hesitate to kill to keep this secret buried. Nathan shook his head. You should have walked away years ago, Thomas. I couldn't, he said bitterly. It was too late. Before I could say anything, another noise echoed outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the window. Thomas froze. Did you call anyone? He hissed. Nathan glanced toward the door. No, did you? The sound of footsteps approached. Someone pounded on the front door. Police! A voice shouted. My knees nearly gave out in relief. Thomas's face went pale. He turned to Nathan, rage flaring in his eyes. You called them. I didn't, Nathan shouted. I swear. But Thomas didn't believe him. He lunged forward, grabbing his brother by the collar. They struggled, knocking over a chair. I screamed, trying to pull them apart. Thomas shoved Nathan to the ground and reached for the case. "You're not giving them this," he snarled. Nathan grabbed his arm. "It's over, Thomas." Thomas swung his fist, catching Nathan across the jaw. Blood splattered the floor. Nathan gasped, clutching his face. But he didn't let go. I stumbled backward, searching for my phone, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I dialed 911, whispering, "Please, hurry." Nathan coughed, looking up at me. "Get out, Alara, now." The pounding at the door grew louder. "Open up!" Thomas turned toward me, his expression twisted with fury and despair. "You called them," he said softly. "You ruined everything. I could barely breathe. You did that yourself." He took a step toward me, but before he could reach me, the sound of sirens erupted outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, slicing through the darkness. Thomas's eyes darted wildly between me, Nathan, and the door. Before I could respond, a loud crash from the back door shattered our conversation. Thomas had heard everything. The crash came from behind us, a splintering, deafening sound that ripped through the house. For a heartbeat, all three of us froze. Then Thomas moved first. He spun toward the noise, his hand instinctively going for the drawer near the counter, the one where he kept his tools. Or worse, where I knew he kept a gun. Nathan struggled to stand, blood running down his chin. "Thomas, stop! It's the police!" But Thomas didn't stop. His eyes were wild now, the calm, methodical man I'd known completely gone. "You think they're here to help us?" he barked. "They're not. They're here because someone told them everything." The pounding at the front door grew louder. "Police, open up!" I didn't move. My legs felt heavy, my throat dry. Every nerve in my body screamed to run. But I was trapped between the two brothers, between the past and the truth that had finally clawed its way to the surface. Thomas yanked open the drawer, pulling out the handgun. Nathan stumbled forward, hands raised. "You don't have to do this." "Don't tell me what I have to do." Thomas's voice cracked. His hand shook violently as he pointed the gun not at Nathan, but at the case still sitting on the table. "You think I'm letting that evidence ruin us?" "Nobody's ruining you," Nathan shouted. "You already did that yourself." The back door creaked, the wood splintering under another hit. I screamed, "Thomas, stop, please!" For a moment, his eyes flicked toward me. There was a flicker of something: pain, love, regret, before it hardened again. "You shouldn't have gone digging, Alara. You weren't supposed to know." The front door burst open, and the sound of boots filled the hall. "Police, drop the weapon." Thomas turned instinctively toward the noise, gun still in hand. Nathan lunged at him, knocking the gun away just as the officers flooded into the room, their shouts deafening. The weapon slid across the floor, landing near the wall. "Hands where we can see them," one of the officers ordered. Nathan raised his hands immediately, his chest heaving. Don't shoot." But Thomas didn't move. He stood there, eyes darting between me, the case, and the police. His entire body trembled. "You don't understand," he muttered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Sir, put your hands up." He didn't. "Thomas!" I screamed. "Please, just stop." He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw the fear beneath the anger. He wasn't just a man trying to hide a crime. He was a man who'd already been consumed by it. "I tried to protect you," he said softly. "Everything I did was for you." Tears burned my eyes. "Protect me? You lied to me. You killed Daniel." His face crumpled at the name, and for a second, I thought he was going to surrender. But then, his eyes shifted toward Nathan. All the pain twisted into fury. "You should have stayed quiet," he hissed. He lunged for the gun. The next few seconds blurred into chaos. I screamed as the officers shouted, "Drop it! Drop it now!" Nathan dove to grab Thomas's arm, the two of them struggling violently on the floor. The gun fired, once a deafening, shattering sound that made my ears ring. Then silence. Nathan froze, staring down at Thomas, whose body had gone limp beneath him. The gun clattered away. Blood spread slowly across Thomas's shirt, dark and glistening under the harsh light. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The room tilted, the sound of my heartbeat roaring in my ears. The officers rushed in, pulling Nathan back and securing the weapon. One of them knelt beside Thomas, checking for a pulse. The grim look on his face said everything. I dropped to my knees. "No!" The word broke out of me like a sob. "No, no, no!" Nathan stared blankly at the wall, his expression hollow. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I was just trying to stop him." I felt a hand on my shoulder, a police officer gently pulling me away as others filled the room, voices overlapping, radios crackling. The red and blue lights from outside flashed through the windows, painting everything in waves of color. The case still sat on the table, untouched amid the chaos, its surface gleaming dully under the flickering light. Hours passed in a blur. Statements, questions, paramedics. I answered what I could, my voice detached, mechanical. The house no longer felt like mine, it was just a shell filled with echoes and ghosts. When the coroner's van finally drove away, I stood in the driveway, numb. Nathan sat on the steps, his hands cuffed loosely in front of him, blood dried along his jaw. He didn't look at me. One of the detectives, a woman with tired eyes, approached quietly. "Mrs. Harris," she said gently. "We're taking your brother-in-law in for questioning. He's not being charged yet, but he'll need to make a full statement." I nodded weakly. He didn't mean to hurt him." She gave a small, sympathetic nod. "We'll sort it out." As they led Nathan toward the patrol car, he turned to me. His voice barely audible. "More, Ilara. There's another copy." I frowned through my tears. "Another copy of what?" He hesitated, his eyes dark with exhaustion. "Daniel's files. He hid them. I think Lena knows where." Before I could respond, they closed the door and drove him away, leaving me standing in the glow of the flashing lights, my world reduced to ashes. I turned back toward the house. The living room was a mess, blood, papers, overturned furniture, but the case was still there. I walked to it slowly, almost hypnotized. When I opened it, I found it empty, completely empty. My heart dropped. The letters, the photos, the USB drive, everything was gone. A chill crept over me. Someone else had been here. Someone had taken the evidence while chaos unfolded. A single muddy footprint by the back door confirmed it. The thought hit me like ice. Whoever had been watching all along hadn't come for Thomas or Nathan. They'd come for the truth. And they'd gotten it. The sound of sirens grew louder just as Thomas turned toward me with pure hatred in his eyes. When the police arrived, it was already too late. The flashing lights finally faded into the distance, leaving the house eerily quiet. I stood in the doorway long after everyone was gone, my hands trembling, my mind numb. Thomas's blood still stained the living room floor, an ugly reminder of the life that had just imploded in front of me. The air smelled like gunpowder and metal. I didn't cry right away. Shock held me together like a fragile thread, keeping me upright when I should have collapsed. I moved through the house in a daze, every room feeling smaller, emptier. When dawn broke, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty case. Its hollow echo when I tapped it made me shiver. Someone had taken Daniel's evidence. Someone had been inside the house during the chaos, moving like a shadow while I was frozen by grief. A knock on the door jolted me. It was Detective Moreno, the same woman who'd been there the night before. Her expression was weary, her tone soft but steady. "Mrs. Harris, we need you to come down to the station later today. There's more we have to go over." I nodded automatically. "How's Nathan?" "He's shaken," she said. "We haven't charged him yet. From what we can tell, it was self-defense, but there are still inconsistencies." "Inconsistencies?" She hesitated. "Nathan claims he wasn't the one who called us last night, but we received an anonymous tip about a domestic disturbance and a possible weapon. The caller refused to identify themselves." I froze. "Anonymous?" She nodded. "Whoever it was saved your life." That should have been a relief. But all I felt was dread. Someone out there was still pulling the strings, still watching. And they were close enough to know exactly when to make that call. After she left, I showered, scrubbing the blood from my hands until my skin turned red. When I looked at my reflection, I barely recognized the woman staring back, pale, hollow-eyed. Her hair matted from sleepless nights. By the time I reached the police station, Nathan was already in an interrogation room. They let me see him briefly. He looked exhausted, his shoulders hunched, a bruise spreading across his jaw from the fight. "I didn't mean to kill him," he said the moment I sat down. "I swear, Alara. I was trying to stop him." "I know," I said softly. "I saw everything." He rubbed his face, his voice trembling. "But someone else was there last night." I heard the back door open again just for a second, right after the gun went off. My chest tightened. "I think they took the case." His eyes widened. "Then it's starting all over again." "What do you mean?" "Whoever has Daniel's evidence, whatever's on those files, they're not done with us. Thomas wasn't the only one involved. He mentioned others, remember?" I nodded slowly. "The people he said were dangerous." Nathan leaned closer. "Thomas wasn't lying about that. The smuggling, the money, it went higher than him. He was the small piece of something much bigger. Daniel found proof of it, but he never got to share it. And now that proof is out there again." I wanted to believe it was over, but the fear in Nathan's voice told me otherwise. Hours later, the police released him on bail. They ruled Thomas's death an accidental discharge during a struggle. I signed a dozen forms, gave my statement again, and left the station in silence. The press caught wind of it almost immediately. Within days, our faces were splashed across every local headline. "Local businessman killed after shocking family revelation." They wrote about the mysterious death of Daniel Moore resurfacing, about alleged financial crimes tied to the Harris family company. None of them knew the full truth. They couldn't. Nathan stayed with a friend while the investigation continued. I stayed in the house alone for a few nights, though calling it staying felt wrong. I barely slept. Every creak, every distant sound made me jump. Sometimes I swore I could hear footsteps outside, or see the faint reflection of headlights in the window. Then, one evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Mrs. Harris?" a man's voice said smoothly. "My name is Agent Coulson. I'm with the Federal Task Force investigating organized financial crimes in Belmere. We believe your husband was involved in something much larger. We need your cooperation." I clutched the phone tighter. "I've told the police everything I know." "Not everything," he said. "We have reason to believe Daniel Moore gathered evidence of federal-level corruption connected to several companies, including your husband's. We need to know if you still have the files." My breath caught. "I don't," I whispered. "They're gone." There was a pause. "That's unfortunate," he said finally. "For your safety, I suggest you leave town for a while. We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Safety. It was the first time anyone had said that word to me since all this began, but it didn't feel reassuring. If anything, it confirmed what I already suspected. Whatever Daniel had uncovered wasn't just about my husband. It was about people with far more power. The next week was a blur. The police wrapped up their investigation, and Thomas's death was officially ruled an accident during a domestic dispute. Nathan's charges were dropped in exchange for cooperation. He gave them everything: names, bank accounts, even fragments of what Daniel had told him. And then, just like that, it was over. Or, it was supposed to be. The trial that followed months later felt surreal. I sat on the witness stand under harsh lights, testifying against my own husband's crimes. The prosecutors asked about the company, the accounts, the night of Daniel's death. I told the truth, every piece of it that I knew. When they showed me photos of Daniel, I couldn't look. When they mentioned Lena, I hesitated. She'd vanished again, gone before the police could question her. No one knew where she was. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the evidence mounted. I felt every eye on me, every breath of judgment. But I kept going. By the end, Thomas's name became synonymous with scandal. His company was dissolved. The investors pulled out. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, hungry for statements. Nathan received a reduced sentence for obstruction and aiding investigators. I visited him once before he was transferred to a low-security facility. His eyes were tired but clear for the first time in years. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. I wanted to believe him. But as I left the prison gates and looked out at the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching that Daniels case. The missing evidence wasn't gone at all. Because deep down, I knew one thing for certain. In Belmere, nothing ever truly stayed buried. But even after justice was served, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's ghost still watched me from the river. I thought the nightmare was finally over until the letter arrived. Months passed, but the silence that followed the trial didn't feel like peace, it felt like the pause before another storm. Belmere returned to its sleepy rhythm, the papers moved on to new scandals, and neighbors stopped whispering when I walked by. Outwardly, life was normal again. But inside, I was still waiting for something, an answer, a reckoning. A sign that it was truly over. I sold the house on the lake. I couldn't stand to look at the water anymore, the way it shimmered under the sun, pretending to be beautiful while hiding what lay beneath. I rented a small apartment closer to town, one with thin walls and the constant hum of traffic that somehow made me feel less alone. Some mornings, I'd wake to the smell of coffee brewing and almost forget. But then I'd see the stack of court documents on the counter, or the faint scar on my wrist from that night's struggle, and the illusion would break. Nathan wrote from prison once a week. His letters were full of remorse, apologies for dragging me into his brother's world, for keeping quiet so long. He said he was trying to start over, that he'd joined a therapy group for inmates. He ended every letter with the same line. "The truth is never finished, Alara. Be careful." I didn't know what he meant until that morning in late September. The letter came without a return address. The envelope was pale blue, the handwriting elegant, almost feminine. I assumed it was another sympathy note from someone in town. But when I opened it, a single photograph fell onto the table, a photograph of me. I froze. It showed me standing by the river months earlier, right before I found the case. The image was sharp, detailed, too detailed. The angle suggested it had been taken from the trees, someone watching from the shadows. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper inside. The message was short, written in black ink. "You opened what was meant to stay buried." My pulse spiked. The letters were precise, deliberate, like someone had taken their time writing each one. There was no signature, no name, just those 8 words. I read them again and again until they blurred. Whoever sent it knew everything. They knew about the river, the case, the night Nathan had confessed. They might even know what happened after Thomas's death. That evening, I took the photograph and the letter to Detective Moreno. She studied both carefully. Her brow furrowed. "The ink's fresh," she murmured. "This wasn't printed months ago. Can you trace it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No fingerprints. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing." "But, Ilara," she hesitated. "You need to understand something. The people Thomas was working with, they don't like loose ends." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Loose ends. That was what I'd become. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Small things, footsteps behind me when I walked to my car. Headlights that seemed to linger a little too long in my rearview mirror. Once, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar, though nothing was missing. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia. Trauma. Not danger. But my gut said otherwise. One evening, after another restless night, I decided to visit Nathan in prison. I needed to know what he meant in his letters. The truth is never finished. When I entered the visitation room, he looked thinner than before, his once dark hair streaked with gray. The moment he saw my face, his expression changed. "You got something, didn't you?" he said. I hesitated. "A letter, no return. Address." It said I opened what was meant to stay buried. Nathan's jaw tightened. "You need to leave town, Alara." "Who sent it, Nathan?" I pressed. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "The people Thomas worked for, they never found Daniel's backup drive, the one he hid before he died. I think they believe you have it." "I don't," I said quickly. It's gone. Everything from the case disappeared that night. Someone took it, Nathan said. They think it's you. And if they think that, they'll come for you. Fear coursed through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Then tell me who they are. He shook his head slowly. I don't know names. Only that they were connected to one of Thomas's investors, a man named Crane. He was powerful, ruthless. Daniel mentioned him once, said he wasn't just laundering money. He was moving something else. Something else? Nathan's voice dropped. People. My blood ran cold. You mean... He nodded. Trafficking. Daniel found proof. That's what got him killed. I covered my mouth, nausea rising. All this time, I thought it was greed, just money and corruption. But it was darker. Far darker. Nathan gripped the edge of the table. You have to disappear, Alara. Go somewhere no one knows you. Change your name if you have to. I stared at him through the glass, trying to read his face. He wasn't lying. The terror in his eyes was too real. When I left the prison that day, the sky was gray and heavy, the air thick with rain. I drove home in silence, my thoughts spiraling. That night, I packed a small bag, passport, cash, the essentials. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew I couldn't stay. I tucked the letter and photograph into the bottom of the bag as proof, or maybe as a warning to myself not to forget what I'd survived. Before I turned off the lights, I glanced out the window one last time. The street was empty, quiet. But then I saw it, a shadow moving across the opposite sidewalk. Slow, deliberate. The faint glint of metal in their hand caught the light before they disappeared into the dark. I stepped back from the glass, heart hammering, barely breathing. Whoever had sent that letter wasn't finished with me. That night, I saw a shadow move past my window holding something that glinted like metal. The river keeps secrets, but it never forgets. The night I saw the shadow outside my window, something inside me broke. Fear had lived in my body for so long that it had become a part of me, but this time, it wasn't just fear, it was finality. I knew then that I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to end this story before it ended me. By dawn, I was gone. I packed everything that mattered into a single duffel, some cash, a few clothes, Nathan's last letter, and left Belmere without looking back. I didn't tell the police. I didn't even tell Nathan. Some secrets were safer unspoken. I drove until the roads grew unfamiliar and the air smelled of salt instead of pine. I found a small coastal town several hours away, the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business. I rented a room above a bakery and told the landlord my name was Evelyn Cross. It felt strange, saying it out loud, but also freeing. For a while, the ocean replaced the river in my nightmares. Its rhythm lulled me to sleep. Its waves erased the sound of sirens and gunfire. I found work at a small bookstore near the harbor, stacking shelves and answering to a name that wasn't mine. Some days, I even laughed. I started to believe maybe this was what healing felt like, not forgetting, but learning how to live with what you remember. But peace, I learned, is a fragile thing. 3 months after I moved, a letter arrived at the shop. No return address. My hands went cold before I even opened it. Inside was a single photograph, the same, the one I'd received before, the one of me standing by the river. But this time, another figure was visible in the background. A man, his silhouette half hidden by trees. The handwriting was different this time, slanted and hurried. He's closer than you think. I stared at the words until the edges of my vision blurred. The letters trembled in my hand. Whoever had taken that picture, whoever had been following me, hadn't stayed behind in Belmere. That night, I went to the beach and sat by the water, staring at the endless dark horizon. The tide whispered softly, pulling and retreating, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. I remembered the way the river used to sound at night, the same rhythm, the same pull, and realized I'd never escaped it. I'd only traded one current for another. I stayed like that until sunrise, the wind cold against my face. When I finally stood, I knew what I had to do. I had to go back. Not for the past, but for the truth Daniel had died for. The truth Thomas had tried to bury, and the one Nathan had been too afraid to face. I drove back to Belmere 2 days later. The town looked the same, but it felt wrong, like a painting that had been left too long in the sun, familiar shapes fading into distortion. The lake glistened under the pale autumn light, calm and deceitful as ever. Nathan was still in prison, but through his lawyer, I managed to arrange another visit. He looked surprised when he saw me. "You shouldn't have come back," he said immediately. "I didn't come back for you," I said quietly. "I came for the drive, the one Daniel hid." He blinked, confused. "I told you, I don't know where it is." I leaned closer. "Someone does. And they followed me. They sent me another photo, the same one, but with someone in it. Nathan, who else knew about that river? About that exact spot?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table. "Lena," he whispered. The name hit, like a wave. "She's still alive?" "She disappeared again after the trial," he said. "But if anyone still has the drive, it's her. Daniel trusted her once. Maybe he trusted her enough to leave it with her." My breath quickened. "Do you know where she'd go?" Nathan nodded slowly. "There's a cabin, the one near the woods by the lake. You saw it. That's where she and Daniel used to meet. If the drive's anywhere, it's there." The drive back to that cabin felt like descending into the heart of everything I'd been running from. The trees were bare now, their branches like claws against the gray sky. The cabin was the same old, rotting, forgotten. I stepped inside. Dust coated the furniture. A faint scent of mildew and something older lingered. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I searched, heart pounding. Then, in the corner beneath a loose plank, I found it, a small metal flash drive wrapped in a torn piece of cloth. My hands shook as I held it. Daniel's proof. I didn't know what it contained: photos, documents, maybe names, but I knew it was the reason he'd died, and the reason I'd been hunted. It felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of every secret that had drowned in that river. I slipped it into my pocket and turned to leave. But when I stepped outside, I froze. Someone was standing at the edge of the trees, tall, still, watching, the same silhouette from the photograph. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his gaze like a blade against my skin. For a long, unbearable moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, he turned and disappeared into the woods. I didn't chase him. I just stood there, clutching the drive so tightly that the metal dug into my palm. By the time I reached my car, the sky had darkened. I drove straight to the river, the place where it all began. The water looked calm, innocent, the surface mirroring the dying light. I walked to the edge and stared. At my reflection, the face of a woman who'd lost everything and somehow lived to tell the story. For a long time, I stood there, the flash drive in my hand. I could take it to the police. I could expose the truth, but I knew what that would mean: more names, more deaths, more shadows at my window. Some secrets destroy everything they touch. I looked at the river one last time. Then I threw the drive into it. The splash was small, but it echoed like thunder in my chest. Maybe the truth didn't belong to anyone anymore. Maybe it was better off buried where it started, beneath the same waters that had taken Daniel, that had hidden Thomas's sins, that had kept my silence. As the ripples faded, I turned and walked away, the wind rising behind me. The river whispered softly, its voice low and familiar. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if the river had ever given me the whole truth at all.